The board meeting will begin in 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The board meeting will begin in 1 minute. Oh, no. The March 7th State Board meeting will now come to order. Good morning and welcome to the March 7th, 2025 State Board of Education meeting. Board members, please engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you're finished speaking. Please note that board members may be using their cell phones and laptop computers to access the agenda and information related to this meeting. Live streaming is available through the State Board of Education website. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Kristen Christensen.
Here.
Maggie Douglas.
Here.
Lisa Schonhoff.
Here.
Liz Renner.
Here.
Kirk Penner.
Here.
Sherry Jones.
Here.
Elizabeth Tegmeyer.
Here.
Deborah Neary.
Here.
Commissioner Maher,
Here.
all present.
Quorum is established. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted as you enter the room from the main entrance doors. The Open Meetings Act is also posted on the State Board of Education's website. The first item of business is the Commissioner's report. Commissioner Maher, please provide your report.
Thank you. And I just shared with a couple of board members that this might be my longest report ever, so get comfortable. The other thing, too, if you're wondering about my voice, I've been taking voice lessons. I'm trying out for the baritone position on a barbershop quartet. While my voice is getting closer to that pitch, the fact that I can't sing probably still works against me. I want to start with some good news today. This was just handed to me earlier today, and that is that the Nebraska Center for the Education of Children Who Are Blind or Visually Impaired, NCEL-BVI, has their 150-year birthday today. And it was just asked, could you celebrate that? And I said, absolutely. That's a big thing, and I think gets under-discussed by us. We forget that they are part of us. So congratulations for them. So good morning, board, and all those listening in. I often get asked, so what does the Commissioner of Education do? I'm hoping you don't ask that question a lot, but maybe you do. And I love to tell people about the complexity and the excitement of the work that I get to do. But for you all, I want to use my schedule from the last week and a half to illustrate what keeps me busy and keeps me motivated. A great deal of my time is spent working with partners as part of the many other duties as assigned that go along with being the commissioner. As an example, last Tuesday, and I'm talking about a week and a half ago now, I joined colleagues from higher education and labor to testify in support of LB 11. That is funding for the Nebraska Statewide Workforce and Educational Reporting System, or NSERS. You may recall this was one of the agency's biennial budget requests, and the executive committee agreed with my recommendation to support this bill and testify on our department's behalf. Another part of my work involves being the face of our agency a good amount of the time, speaking about our top priorities and informing all of those who will listen about the roles that our agency plays. Every now and then, and certainly not often enough, I get the chance to speak to youth around the state. One such event was last week, about a week and a half ago on Wednesday, for the Educators Rising State Conference in Kearney. During this time, I was able to speak to my own pathway into education, starting as a math teacher and physics teacher, to be in a room full of potential teachers and thinking about their future impact definitely filled my bucket last Wednesday. In addition, this Sunday, I'll speak in Omaha to a group of health occupation students with a very similar and I hope they'll motivate me, conversation with kids across Nebraska. Finally, part of my role also involves building critical relationships with legislators and other policymakers in our state. And I acted on this last Thursday when I testified before the Appropriations Committee on our agency's budget priorities. During this time, I again shared more about the Department of Education, our staff, our funding sources, our top priorities, and I have appreciated our team's efforts with the legislature and look forward to continuing to build on this as this session progresses. I would thank Board President Tegmeyer for coming across the state to be a part of that. I asked her to attend because I thought it was important that the commissioner and a representative of the board went in together so that this isn't a divide and a conquer, it's groups working together. So thank you for your presence. From working with the partners to speaking on the agency's behalf and building relationships with policymakers, I really have enjoyed my work over the start of this calendar year. A couple of other items and updates regarding the strategic plan. I want to thank you for engaging yesterday during our work session. I took a lot away from the session and know that our team did too. We were 8 for 8 in terms of engagement, and I lost a bet, Kirk, thanks to your being engaged. So really appreciate all 8 of you truly being a part of the process. On the literacy front, I want to share a couple of quick updates. First, as you may recall, our legislators appropriated $1.8 million per year for 3 years, which goes towards supporting literacy coaching. We've worked closely with Dr. Larry Ann Polk at the ESUCC and several other ESUs to support the hiring of coaches and begin conversations on a summer coaching workshop to expand coaching further around our state. More details will come on that, and just to reiterate, I think it's hard sometimes to remember where the various funding sources are coming for our literacy work. This one comes from a state appropriation and is not part of the CLSD funding, but rather state appropriated dollars. Additionally, as part of Tenet 2 in our literacy plan, we published an educator preparation program guide to implementing the science of reading. It's been well received, at least as far as we can tell at this point in the field, and we look forward to continuing to iterate the expectation and also iterating the guide as we need to. I want to address briefly how the Department of Education is monitoring and preparing for changes at the federal level. Recent policy changes and directives from Washington may be creating questions or maybe some uncertainty with our school districts. So in late February, I shared some thoughts with our school leaders, and I'll reiterate some of those to you now. First of all, we won't panic on what might happen. We'll wait and make sure that we know what's happening. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in what's going on in D.C. I'm incredibly interested in what's going on in D.C. But until we have facts, we won't make up our own facts. Most education policy, as you know, is made at the local level with community leaders like local school boards implementing policy and making decisions for their students and families. State education agencies, like the Department of Education, implement both state and federal law. State agencies, like the Nebraska Department of Education, are critical for monitoring and compliance. State education agencies, like the Department of Education, are vital for adequately monitoring compliance with federal funds and ensuring both state and federally funded programs are implemented and implemented with fidelity. The structure of the State Department of Education in Nebraska ensures coherence among the many facets in the education space. We are able to work together across agencies, and I'll pull 3 out in particular, like special education, because when I wonder about what might happen, my mind goes to special education, what happens there. Another particular area that might not be as obvious to folks is career and technical education. A large grant that we receive is the Perkins Grant. What happens there? And another piece that is, I think, underknown around the state that is part of the Department of Education is vocational rehabilitation to ensure the continuity of services to all students and clients in the efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So what do we know about those? We know essentially the same thing today that we knew yesterday that we knew last week, and we haven't changed any of our operations as a result of anything changing in Washington. But if there are changes in Washington, we'll continue to monitor any potential impact on staff and the need to engage further with federal, state, and local leaders, including and starting with the members of the State Board of Education. Our mission to lead and support the preparation of all Nebraskans for learning, earning, and living remains paramount to our work. That goal does not change. I feel strongly that as long as you, as this state's education leaders, and our staff keep that mission as our North Star, we'll navigate any change at the federal and state levels. So, as Forrest Gump once said, that's all I have to say about that. Interviews for Deputy Commissioner. They've concluded. First, I would tell you that a wide net was cast to bring in the best candidates possible for consideration for the position. 3 particular areas produced candidates. Internal interest, folks within the Department of Education, State Department interest from other state departments around the country, and then also interest from the field, folks who are working in the field of education current practitioners in K-12 and higher ed. And after a thorough vetting process, one candidate stood out. And I've selected and offered the position to Jane Stavum. Jane has deep roots as a teacher, elementary principal, and superintendent. She worked in Columbus, Lincoln, and Blair, and most recently and currently, Jane has been the superintendent in the Sioux Falls School District in South Dakota. If that rings a bell, Sioux Falls is where I also served as a superintendent for 5 years. Jane was my successor in Sioux Falls. So I'll be anxious to hear a little compare and contrast from my friends up there after she comes down here. Okay, that part's a joke. Jane and I have never worked together, but I'm excited to have that opportunity. Jane brings strong experience in K-12 to this position with an elementary perspective that is currently a little bit lacking at the senior leadership level. We have a good, strong 7 through 12 emphasis at the senior leadership level, so to bring that elementary level I think will be important. In addition, I believe she'll add a great deal of knowledge to our quest to improve literacy outcomes in the state of Nebraska. This item is on your consent agenda, so you don't need to do anything about it now, but you will vote on it later in the consent agenda. And that concludes my report. Go to the red letters. Oh, I forgot to start. There is one item that has been identified to be removed from the consent agenda. The item is 6.3.A. What is that word?
That's not right. It's 6.7.B. Lisa, isn't it? 6.7.B. Yeah.
Okay, 6.3.A was an error. Strike that. It's okay. It is item 6.7.B, and it is specifically on the tobacco prevention grant. If board members wish to remove additional items from the consent agenda, please fill out the form at this time. Any items removed from the consent agenda will be taken up under additional business. Now, I believe that concludes my report.
Okay. All right, so we're on agenda item 3.2, and this is the update of Teacher of the Year. So if NDE staff member David Jesperson could come to the front of the room for an update on the Teacher of the Year program. Thank you, David.
Good morning, David Jesperson, Administrator of the Office of Public Information and Communication, and I come before you today because I'm also the coordinator of the Nebraska Teacher of the Year program, which is a great program, and we have a lot of fun with this program every single year. I know many of you may be saying, didn't we just meet the 2025 Teacher of the Year like about a month ago? Yes, you did. But every March, we've begun a process where we are launching our search for the next 2026 Nebraska Teacher of the Year. The process is a lengthy one, and it takes that much time to select our candidates and get that through. So today I'm here to launch that program and fill you in a little bit on what the Teacher of the Year program is, especially since we have some new faces with the board this year as well. So it's part of the National Teacher of the Year program, which is put on by the CCSSO's teacher program. It's considered the most prestigious recognition program in the country, and every year CCSSO provides state teachers of the year with a year-long, one-of-a-kind professional learning and development experience designed to increase their educator leadership skills while celebrating their talents and commitment as extraordinary teachers. And every year, one teacher from the pool of state teachers of the year is selected to be the National Teacher of the Year. Where we are in the process right now is that they have selected the 4 finalists for the National Teacher of the Year. They come from America Samoa, Colorado, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania, and they should be naming the National Teacher of the Year sometime within the next month or so. And that person will start their year of service. There are actually 56 currently state teachers of the year in this program. You have your 50 states, America Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, Department of Defense, Washington, D.C., Guam, and the Virgin Islands. And CCSSO is looking to expand to include Puerto Rico next. And they're building a program in Puerto Rico as we speak to try to get a Teacher of the Year from that jurisdiction as well. Every year, the Teacher of the Year from Nebraska has, and all the state Teachers of the Year, get to do some specific things through the year through CCSSO. The first thing that they get to do is a teacher orientation, which just happened a couple of weeks ago. During that process, they visit Google to learn a little bit more about different technologies that are happening in the classroom. They'll be able to visit NASA Space Camp, where they work with their cohort. They always have a DC visit and a Washington visit that includes a visit to the White House. And then they wrap up their year actually dipping into the next year at the college football championship game. Of course, you met our Teacher of the Year from 2025. This is Lindsay Wilson. She's a Science and Social Studies teacher with Bennington Middle School, and she did get started in her year. She's already done a number of speaking engagements. We try to keep her pretty busy while also honoring her time in the classroom as well. And she is somewhere in the middle of that crowd of folks. This was from their teacher orientation that happened about 3 weeks ago. The big news for today is that we have officially launched the 2026 Teacher of the Year nominations. So you can find that nomination form on our main webpage. If you search Nebraska Teacher of the Year, it should take you to the nomination and application forms as well. Our process is an open nomination process, which means the nomination can come from literally anyone. We've often gotten nominations from students, from family, from colleagues, from principals, superintendents, and any of you could nominate someone that you believe is worthy of the Teacher of the Year award. The nominations are pretty simple. They just ask for the teacher's name, what school they attend. If you have their email, fantastic. And then a brief description of why you believe they should represent Nebraska as the next Teacher of the Year. The application process is also an open application process. So once we get nominations in, we notify those teachers that they have been nominated, and they choose whether or not they would like to move forward in the application process. Someone does not need to be nominated to start the application process either. Every year we have several teachers that will enter the program and start the application process before a nomination comes in. So my ask for everyone here is that we have been steadily increasing our nominations every year. Last year we had just over 100 unique nominations. I say that because every year it's a lot of fun. We have a handful of teachers that will get 5, 6 nominations come in. We've had teachers in the past where you could tell it was a class got together, and we'd have I'll get 10 nominations for the teacher like in the same 2-minute time span. So that's always a lot of fun too. And we love that as well. So highly encourage you to spread the word that the nomination process is open. The easiest way to nominate is to go to our main website. New this year, I'll showcase as well. I've been working with our graphic design artist, Sydney Wolf, on creating a new brochure that is just a generic brochure for the Teacher of the Year program. We're in the process of printing these out. It gives explanations that I just gave you, along with a QR code on the back that takes folks to a link directly to nominate a Teacher of the Year. We'll be giving a large portion of these to Lindsay Wilson as she goes to speaking events in schools across the state, but I'll also have some available next month that I can give every one of you as well. I would love if you, when you make visits to schools or wherever you are in the public, to share that as well. I'd love to have the problem of having too many nominations and too many applications. We want to find the best and the brightest, and we've been doing a really good job with that, and we hope to have some nominations. Actually, we launched this 2 days ago, and I already have a nomination in my inbox. So somebody caught it before I even launched it officially, so I'm really appreciative of that. With that, if you have any questions about the Teacher of the Year program. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Next item of business is the president's report. There is no president's report. Item 5.1, public comment. So we will now move to the public comment period. This period may be available to any person who wishes to address the board on any matter appearing on the agenda. Up to 90 minutes will be allowed for the public comment period. A majority of members present and voting may take action to extend the total amount of time allowed for the public comment period. A majority of members present and voting may also take action to allow or terminate public comment at any time during the meeting. If you are not signed in and wish to speak, please sign in at this time. Those wishing to speak must be signed in at the table outside the meeting room. Each individual speaking to the board will be required to complete a sign-in card for identification of oneself. Individuals are required to include on the sign-in card their name, address, and name of any organization represented. Individuals may be prohibited to speak in public comment if the sign-in card does not include the required information. Persons speaking to the board during public comment should state their name, city, and state at the beginning of their allotted time, and may submit printed materials for the board but may not use any other form of media. Anyone refusing to be identified will be prohibited from speaking. Each person may address the board for up to 5 minutes. A majority of members present and voting may take action to reduce or extend the amount of allotted time to all speakers. If at any time persons appearing before the board exceed the time limitations set forth in this policy or on the agenda, or become abusive or threatening in language or behavior, it shall be the responsibility of the president to refuse permission to continue to address the board. We have 5 public comment cards submitted. Vice President Neary will announce the names of the speakers.
Okay, if you want to come up in this order, we'll start with Al Koontz, and he'll be followed by Dan Hayes. And Dan, then you can just come up when he's finished. And Robin McKercher will be third. Thank you.
Good morning, President Tegmeyer, board members, commissioner. Thank you for having us again. If you remember, we were here last month. We had 11 speakers and 27 letters by my count, and we were encouraging changes to Rule 24 regarding speech and theater. And we've heard encouraging words regarding our request. We're back to encourage movement, urgency. And as an aside, Steve Barth, if you remember, Steve Barth was here last month from Crane River Theater in Kearney. He was the guy on the crutch. And he takes applications for his theater program every summer. He's had 7,000 applicants this year that he's going through, and they send in videos, and he and his staff are going through those 7,000 videos. So theater is alive and well in Nebraska. We have 3 theaters here, or 3 colleges here today to speak to the issue, and I'm going to end my remarks at that, but I do have a request, if possible. Ryan Kathman from Nebraska Wesleyan has a class at 10 o'clock today. I was wondering if we could move him up on the list, if that would be possible with your approval. I know that's a little out of the ordinary. If not, we'll make it do. We've only got, I don't know where he is on the list, but with the 5 minutes, he should be okay, but I just thought maybe to give him.
Thank you, yes.
I'm sorry.
We will move Ryan Kathman to speaker number 2.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Ryan Kathman, we don't want you to be late for class.
My students do, though. Good morning, board members. Thank you for having me. My name is Ryan Kathman. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a professor of theater at Nebraska Wesleyan University in my 8th year. I'm here to speak and express my strong support for this proposal to allow the secondary education majors to earn a subject endorsement in theater and speech as opposed to merely a supplemental endorsement. I'm deeply committed to the growth and development of aspiring educators. I believe that this proposed change would significantly improve the quality not only of theater and speech education, but also the lives and the career potential for students across Nebraska. Theater and speech are core elements of a well-rounded secondary education that foster creativity, critical thinking, communication skills, and emotional intelligence. And these are qualities that you'll find that Fortune 500 CEOs overwhelmingly say they're looking for in employers. I think it's sometimes a shame that these kinds of things are termed soft skills, but what it really means is they are flexible and malleable, and they transfer no matter what kind of aspect of life or careers people decide to pursue or find themselves in. If you want to know about what it is to be adaptable and to pivot when something unexpected happens, talk to a student who's forgotten a prop on stage or has found somebody, their scene partner is still in the bathroom and they have to improvise. If you want to learn about leadership, talk to students who are the head of their backstage crews or are assistant directors or choreographers, and the effort to coordinate and get everyone working together on that. And certainly talk to a high school drama teacher or speech coach about leadership, and they can tell you all of the many skills and qualities that have to come together to be able to every year coordinate major efforts to accomplish what seems like impossible tasks on a timeline, on a tight budget. And as I played sports. I did all sorts of different activities in high school as that kid who's never home. But as much benefits as there are to every other activity a student can do, I find there's nothing that quite combines them all like the not only artistic expression and creativity required for theater, but it's physical engagement, using your body. Go to a dance call sometime, see how you can keep up with that. The technical skills required for building sets and costumes. The list goes on of all the things, all the potential benefits, no matter where life takes somebody who's studying theater and speech. So a full endorsement would not only enhance the preparation of future teachers, but also encourage more students to pursue theater and speech as a viable and valuable part of their education. Additionally, it would reflect the growing recognition of theater as an academic discipline worthy of specialized study and training on par with other subjects like English, math, and science. The performing arts and public speaking require innovative ideas, adaptability, resiliency, collaboration, and perhaps most valuable of all, they foster empathy in students in ways that few other subject areas can. I'm just going to wrap up here soon. This change will benefit the educational system in lots of ways. It'll attract more students to the teaching profession in the arts, increase the number of qualified theater educators, improve the quality of theater instruction in Nebraska's high schools, and this will have a positive impact on students who will benefit from a deeper engagement with the arts, as well as the wider community that will benefit from their skills. For the last 3 years at my own institution, I've taught a methods of teaching theater and speech at the secondary level course. It's a really long title. And all the graduates who've taken that class have been hired for full-time positions in Nebraska right after graduation. I've got a couple more that I taught recently who are still finishing this year and doing their student teaching this semester. Our curriculum at NWU is already equipped and structured to offer a subject endorsement for theater and speech, and we would welcome the opportunity to reinstate a recently deleted theater education BA degree program. We recently deleted it, realizing that it was inefficient for our students, especially when only a supplemental endorsement is available. But our department would be thrilled to be able to reinstate that if a subject endorsement was allowed. So I urge the Nebraska Board of Education to approve the proposed change that will allow secondary ed majors to earn a subject endorsement in theater and speech. The impact of this decision will be far-reaching, both in terms of academic achievement and the long-term cultural enrichment of our state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 more university professors. Are either one of you going to be late for class? No.
I canceled mine. And I do have a prospective student at noon, but I'm good till then. So, good morning. My name is Dan Hayes. I was here in January to speak before you. It's good to see you all again, and thank you. It's been wonderful getting to see what you do, and I appreciate everything you do. I'm the director of theater at Midland University, and I have been working on this for now about a year, and I feel like we're really being heard, and I really appreciate that. I've put a packet together, and I'm just going to talk about a few things. I'm not going to talk a long time. There's a lot of information there for you, but I always feel like I do a lot better with practical, real life things rather than just the ethereal things. So I've really listed everything that I'm working on right now so you can see it. One of the things that I should do a full disclosure. I want you all to know that I found out that Liz Renner and I were in a show together many years ago. And so if you all want to see a picture of her, a 10-year-old picture of when she was 10, we were in a show together back then. So, but I did put together we go to the thespian conventions to recruit. And on it, it lists their interests of, do they want to be a professional actor? What do they want to do? And I've put together how many people are really looking for education. And it's, I think it's higher than what's there, but this is the kids that we saw. I also put together places where there have been openings in the secondary programs in Nebraska for last year and for the year before that, or this year, this upcoming year, and then last year, and then for the last 5 years. And there's quite a few schools, and some of them have never filled those positions. Also, I put together places that universities and colleges that are willing to put these programs forward, and I'm really excited that two of my colleagues are here to also speak to that. I want you to know that there is a list there of schools that are needed, that need instructors. It's not exhaustive. It's just the ones I know and that I have checked with the Nebraska high school board to make sure that I'm not saying anything that's not correct. I also want you to know that Midland has met as an arts department, and we met with the education department and with our administration. We are all ready to go. We have everything in place, ready to go. We have applied for a special waiver so we could go ahead and do it before it happens. And a question that came to me was, well, then, why would we need this? And truly, we need it at all of our universities. I'm glad to have it at Midland if we can do that, but we need it at all the universities, and I hope that we're showing that. I also listed my students at Midland who are in the same class that Ryan was talking about, the methods of teaching theater, and where they are right now and what they're doing, and to the best of my knowledge. And then I think the last thing in your packet is a pretty passionate letter. Sorry, didn't realize it was going to be 5 pages long, but from one of my students who is going to be teaching. She's got a job at the Bennington School District in the fall. And she's student teaching right now, but she really wants to teach theater and speech. And she is pretty passionate about the fact that she wishes that we offered that here at the Nebraska state level. I've also listed all my contact information, so if you're going through this and you have some questions, I am absolutely willing to answer anything. So thank you all for considering this, and again, I thank you all for all your work you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McKercher? And then Rachel Pinkerton after.
Good morning. My name is Professor Robin McKercher. I live in Crete, Nebraska. I've been teaching theater at Doane University for 20 years. I received my bachelor degree at Peru State College and my MFA at UNL. At Peru, I'm not going to tell you how long ago this was. I received a secondary ed teacher endorsement in my area study, which was speech and drama. This Nebraska boy did really well in the industry thanks to my Nebraska collegiate education. I lived in New York for 10 years. I worked on 38 Broadway shows, including The Secret Garden, which won the Tony Award, where I was the Master Scenic Artist. I received the Lincoln Mayor's Arts Award. I got Best Director in Pennsylvania, and while teaching at Doane these past years, we've won 170 regional and national awards, including one of my students who went to Washington, D.C. and won Best Director in America. I've come to address what I perceive as a shortcoming in how Nebraska handles its secondary education endorsement for the theater. When I first started at Doane, there was a really healthy endorsement that we saw our young people go out and teach in the state of Nebraska. But since that was removed and we've moved toward sort of a more generalized degree, secondary ed English language arts, which is a combination of journalism, forensics, English, and theater, I want to talk about the things that I've witnessed at Doane with the declining number of theater students. I believe this decline is due in large part to this, I don't want to call it a lack of education, because these universities really do a fantastic job educating in their areas, but it's that endorsement that we need. When I first started at Doane, they had to take a multiplicity of theater classes in order to teach on the secondary ed level. Now they take one, usually acting. And those teachers have to direct those students, they have to build that scenery, and they're not trained to do that anymore. When I started at Doane and began recruiting, we had at our zenith well over 80 theater scholarship holders, primarily from Nebraska. Today, that number has slipped to about 30, mostly from out of state. We're missing out on a huge economic benefit by bringing these students to our universities and colleges. Because of the lack of Nebraska theater students, we're forced to recruit in other states now, including Texas, Missouri, Kansas, and Colorado. I personally recruit in Kansas and Texas. Now, I'm going to give you a baseline about what it's like in Nebraska. At the Nebraska Thespians, where we see on average, for a theater scholarship, we see on average about 10 students. At probably its nadir, it was 6 students we interviewed. And this number has been steadily declining. In Kansas, at the recent festival I attended last month, there were 1,700 theater students that attended there. I auditioned 77 eager high school thespians, with 9 delineating their future majors as theater ed, and that's about 12%. In Texas, we participate in 2 festivals, one at Grapevine, the other in Corpus Christi. We see over 10,000 students. I auditioned over 700. Of that 700, about 90 or so are going to move into theater ed. Those students in Texas and Kansas will never come here. In fact, right now I have a student we recruited from Missouri. She's a freshman. She's a really great talent. But she discovered she has no real opportunity for theater ed, so she's moving. She's going to finish her college education in Missouri, where they do offer that endorsement. So number one, I feel that we have had a severe deficit that was created years ago, and we have an eager possibility of rectifying this, and I encourage you to do so. Number two, we're missing out on an amazing economic opportunity. That Texas and Colorado, the festival in Texas generates $1.5 million for those communities, for all those students who go there. It's an amazing thing to see in Texas, all those eager theater students, and I'd like to see that happen again in Nebraska. So thank you for your time. Thank you for consideration, and I did get under it a little bit, so thank you very much. By the way, I am directed with Steve Barth this summer. See how it's sort of this little world that we all work in. I'm directing Legally Blonde this summer with Steve, and I'm so excited that we have that many auditioners. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Rachel Pinkerton, please.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Pinkerton. I come today from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm a mighty Benson bunny. Both my husband and I are Benson High grads. I come to speak in opposition to universal mental health screenings and interventions by people operating outside of their scope of practice. I have served on the State Mental Health Advisory Committee by appointment by 2 different governors. In 2008, I was recruited to be on the Youth Behavioral Health Task Force of the Building Bright Futures initiative. If you were paying attention back then to education, you probably noticed that effort. I'm going to read you the final paragraph of an email I sent you. I make no assumptions that it landed with you when it showed up in your email. In 2012, I was part of a school bus full of people attending the State Board of Education to support not joining Common Core, not signing up to the Common Core State Standards Initiative. It turns out we had the element of surprise. That was not my plan, but nobody on the entire board, including my own representative, had read my email with enough comprehension to realize I was announcing that we were going to bring a school bus full of people. So since I do want you to hear what I had to say, I'll just read my final paragraph. Mental health is supported by living in reality, education that nurtures habits of objectivity and curiosity is healthy. Sound instruction opens minds to insights to be gained from literature, history, mathematics, science, the arts, and other avenues for exploring the truth about ourselves and our place in the universe. Thanks for your dedication to this high calling.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our public testifiers today giving us comment. We do have no written comments submitted this month. Agenda item 6. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda without item 6.7.b?
I move to adopt the consent agenda without 6.7.b.
Second.
Is moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Per board policy, there is no discussion on the motion to adopt the consent agenda. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the consent agenda is adopted. We're actually running a little bit faster. I was planning to take a break at this point, but I think we're going to press on. So the next item of business are the reports of the standing committees. I will report on behalf of the executive committee meeting. The executive committee reports on its March 6, 2025 meeting. Members present were Chair Elizabeth Tegmeyer, Vice Chair Deb Neary, Sherry Jones, and Liz Renner. The committee had 2 discussion items. First, the committee reviewed proposed legislation scheduled for hearings next week and advised the commissioner on the NDE positions on legislative bills. The committee continues to meet weekly through the legislative session to advise the commissioner on legislative matters. Second, the committee had discussion on board member legislative testimony on education bills and recommends this item for a full board discussion. The committee reviewed 1 information item. The committee was informed on the status of the NDE personnel rules and was provided a summary of changes. A timeline for this work and necessary milestones were shared. A brief discussion followed. Finally, the committee began discussion on the commissioner's performance review and associated process and vendor selection. This concludes the executive committee report. Chair Elizabeth Tegmeyer. Are there any questions on the executive committee report? Okay. Seeing none, agenda item 7.1.a. Board members, are there questions or discussion on this item? Okay. All right, the next item of business is 7.1.b. And this is board member legislative testimony on education. And this item was placed on our agenda by board member Neary. She did ask me to open the discussion on this agenda item. Typically, my custom is to not weigh in on on an issue until all members of the board have spoken, but today I'm just going to veer away from that self-imposed practice for just a minute. I do want to say that yesterday in committee, we had very good conversation about the variety of ways that a board member could be asked his or her opinion on a particular topic in education, and even the personal choice that we have of weighing in on educational issues. The spectrum is pretty broad on the way that board members weigh in, having a private conversation, hosting a town hall, posting on social media, sending a private email, sending a mass email, publishing updates in newspapers, and submitting written or in-person testimony at the legislature. I mentioned all of these. I was trying to come up with every single way I could think of, because they have all been utilized by current members that are sitting on this board right now from both sides of the aisle. Last night, I spoke with Attorney General Hilgers in order to clarify what the legal boundaries are for board member speech. He reassures each one of us that our freedom of speech did not end when you were elected. Instead, each person should make every effort to let the intended audience know that you're not speaking for the board as a whole. In no way should any of us imply or explicitly state or write anything that would indicate that our thoughts and opinions are an official board statement. To ensure this, the board, past iterations of the board, have placed this restriction in our board operating policy 1.03, which you have a handout of. And this states that board members should add a disclaimer to written communication indicating their statements represent the personal views of the board member and not those of the board. So moving forward, I would just encourage each board member to pull that statement directly from the board operating policy and use it. In writing, it could simply state, these statements represent my personal views and not those of the board. So at this point, I'm going to conclude my remarks that I composed early this morning, and I'll open the conversation up to the rest of the board.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's a good summary of our discussion. And the reason I brought this forward was because there has always been a culture here and an ethical standard that we as board members, while we don't give up our free speech right, we have always held the standard that we don't testify on legislation in opposition to what the board is doing or in a position that is different than the board's. And this only applies to education bills that the board may be weighing in on. And so, but it isn't just that. I just felt like there's been a lot of confusion. Like last year, there was a letter sent to a superintendent signed by a state board member asking for information, no disclaimer, and that superintendent and their board was pretty upset and wrote to all of us that they wondered at what authority that letter had gone since there was no statement. And since last week, 4 board members did write testimony on an education bill that was different from the board's position, I just felt like maybe it was time to have a conversation on where we are with this standard that has been in place for decades, at least here at the state board. And again, this is not at all about anyone's legal rights of free speech. It's about ethical standards that are pretty much in practice across the country and across the state of Nebraska. I called the Board of Representatives from the Board of Regents, asked them what their practice is. They said one time in recent years, in the last few decades, has one board member testified in legislature in opposition to the board. And that person, there was a lot of closed-door meetings about that, and that never happened again. So they have even though it isn't a written policy, because we can't have a written policy that says we're taking away your free speech right. But there has always been an ethical standard here at the Department of Education. The board members don't take actions against the position of the board. That is at the Board of Regents. That is on local boards across Nebraska. And the main reason is there's a level of, transparency and trust that we owe each other. Like, I don't know that we would have been told that this happened. And I guess I was just concerned that 4 board members were following this ethical standard that's been in place forever, and 4 board members decided to change it and to bring politics into the work that we're doing. And I didn't know if it was a simple mistake because they didn't know what our policy was, or they didn't understand what the ethical standard has been for boards like ours. And so I just thought we kind of needed to have a discussion about how everyone feels about this. I mean, it's specific into legislative testimony, but in general, like when we're sending emails out to superintendents, also just a reminder that we always need to add a disclaimer. So I would just love to hear some conversation. I don't know what the right answer is, but I just know what the precedent has been, and I'm curious if we are really at the point where we really think it's important to change that precedent. Thank you.
Just kind of looking to see if anyone wants to add any comments. Liz?
I'll add. I think this conversation comes at a good time because we have 4 new board members, and I don't know that even the 4 not older, non-rookie board members knew that this was kind of an unwritten or unspoken understanding. So I think it's really a healthy activity for us as a board to discuss this together. And where I come down on this issue is mainly we only have impact and power as a board when we act together. We as individuals are not really all that powerful as individual board members. And I think we really do damage to our what we have to offer in terms of leadership as a board when we begin speaking to the legislature, offering testimony on education issues. And I think what it could devolve into if we continue is a board that speaks one way and then 8 people going to the legislature or sending letters with all of our differing opinions wherever they fit on the continuum. And I think it's dangerous because I think it sends confusion to the legislature and to the public and to us actually as a board. So I feel like the reasonable thing to do is maybe set some limits, and I understand it can't be an official policy and definitely don't want to curtail anyone's rights to free speech, but I think we need an agreement to the culture that we want to create on this board of how we want to behave and how we want to present this board's impact to the larger community. And yeah, I guess that's where I land on that.
Lisa, I see you have your light on.
I'm not sure this is the time or the place to have this discussion, but since we're here, I'm actually slightly surprised by the fact that you would be calling this out, Deborah. I have an email here from you with the caption, "Support Our Schools, Nebraska, SOSNE, dear friends." You go on to say, LB 753 was passed during this past legislative session and it will hurt Nebraska public schools, ... You go on to say, repeal LB 753. Please sign the petition to repeal LB 753, ... This is November 5th, 2024. You actually signed it, Nebraska State Board of Education, with your address. And so I would think that this might be a conversation that would have been better privately.
So I do send out an automatic email, and if there was state board at the bottom, I don't recall that. But there is a difference in what we're talking about today. I think that's a really good example, so thanks for bringing that forward. Because I know we've had board members testify on transgender bills, and I've not brought that forward because that is their right, and that's not a position that our state board is taking. Nor do we ever take positions on school financing. So for any of us to have an opinion on something that is not related to the scope of the work of the board, then it's very appropriate for us to have an opinion. Now, there also needs to be a disclaimer, but what we're talking about are bills in the legislature where that are in the scope of the Department of Education and the State Board of Education, and people are taking a position on those, and that is very different. But thank you for bringing that forward, because I'm glad we had that example.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, Kirk, are you?
You know, for the last 2 meetings, we've sat here and been lectured by you, Deborah. Quite frankly, I will continue to voice my opinion against bills that I think are nonsense and bad for education. It's already in policy, and we will continue to do that. And I encourage everybody, no matter what side of the aisle, to continue to do that. Speak for yourself. Stand up for kids. But if we're going to sit here every month and be lectured by you for things that we disagree on, what's changed? Is it a 4-4 board that made it change and you don't like it when we don't agree with what's going on in education? Because you used to be able to just roll over us. 8-0, 7-1, 5-3. So I'm done. I'm done with being lectured from Deb Neary, and we will continue to oppose things, whether it's a bill, an amendment, anything of that nature. And that's where I stand right now.
Thank you, Kirk. I'd like to respond since he addressed something specifically to me. Thank you, Kirk. So the difference right now has nothing to do with politics. I've never made my votes or opinions on politics. What we're talking about right now is there have been actions taken by 4 board members that have never, ever been taken by state board members in the past.
You do not know that.
Okay.
You
Yes.
make wide sweeping accusations. You do not know that. You do not know that. That is not factual. We're the
do know
experts.
that there's never been a board president that's ever done it, because I did make those phone calls. I also called the National School Board Association, and again, there's an ethical standard, even if there isn't a legal standard. And so we now know what your opinion is, that you want to change that standard and culture.
There is no standard or culture.
Okay.
There isn't.
But Kirk, I am going to point out that we do have a policy that already says that you're supposed to state that you are a state board member when you're giving an opinion. And you have repeatedly done that with emails to superintendents, attacks on teachers of the year, et cetera, and nobody's brought it up. And I just think that now we are at a point where we need to remind each other that we are supposed to have that disclaimer in there. And there is a difference between making a statement, giving our opinion, and testifying in the legislature. So I'm hoping that we can decide what we want to do as a board. And we know your opinion, they know mine. You don't need to hear from me anymore unless someone wants to address me specifically with something.
I would ask that we try and keep as many of our comments directed to the topic as we can. Would anyone like to speak who hasn't spoken on this topic? Okay. So seeing no further comments, I would encourage board members to make sure that in all written communications, not just public statements, but not just the written public ones, but also written communications, per Board Operating Policy 1.03, please add in the disclaimer in your written communications, just to keep that as clear as possible for people who are receiving or reading your emails. And when directed by the full board, a board member can speak on behalf of the board.
And can I ask you a question? So as our board president, does this mean that you are planning to continue to testify in positions that are different than our board positions?
I have not testified this year in any positions.
Well, you wrote a letter of testimony, which is the same thing.
I did not write a letter of testimony. I sent an email to 9 state senators. That is not a letter of testimony, and it was not submitted as official legislative testimony.
So that we know as a board what our new culture is, are you planning that, based on everything that we know about the ethical standards across the board and on the national level and here in Nebraska and school boards, that are you telling us that leadership is thinking that we are going to change that standard and that you are going to lead us in that change?
I am going to allow myself to have freedom of speech as the District 7 representative, not as the board president. When I make a statement as the board president, that's because I have been directed to as this full board has directed me to do so.
But that wasn't the case when you wrote that email. So,
But it was not signed as board president.
but it was signed as a state board member without a disclaimer. So,
And so was your mass email. So I think that we just need to move forward from this point and make sure we have the disclaimer.
but my mass email wasn't on a position that the board was involved in. So I think there's a clear difference, and I just wanted to know where you're leading us. And
So maybe
now-
we should have had this
Okay.
conversation in the executive committee, and you should have just brought that out
We
yesterday.
did, and you
But
were
you-
leaning differently yesterday, so at
No,
least that
no,
was
I
my
wasn't
vibe.
leaning
Okay.
differently. I mean, I feel like the choice is I can silence myself or you will silence me, and this is America. So, please, board members, as you move forward, make sure you attach the disclaimer. And I know that you will each represent your district to the best of your ability. I do believe it's been an hour and 5 minutes. We'll take a brief 10-minute break, and board will recess until 10:15. The board meeting will resume in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Grabbing a cup.
She did. Okay. Well, we all learned something. If board members could resume their seats, we'll begin in just a moment. Okay. All right. We will resume the board meeting with agenda item 7.2. Chair Kristen Christensen will report on behalf of the Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
The Budget and Finance Committee reports that at its Thursday, March 6th meeting, members present were Kristen Christensen, Maggie Douglas, Lisa Schoenhoff, and Kirk Penner. The committee reviewed 4 action items. The first item was to amend a contract to extend work related to agricultural, food, and natural resources education and FFA support. The committee recommends the board's approval. The committee then reviewed a grant to support Stronger Connections technical assistance and capacity building programs. No committee recommendation was established. The third action item reviewed was the expansion of Farm to School and Walk to Unlock funds. The committee recommends the board's approval. The last action item reviewed was a contract for a new survey tool. The committee recommends the board's approval of this item. The committee reviewed 2 discussion items that included the monthly board travel expenses with no concerns noted, and the commissioner provided an update regarding the mental health training for staff funds. Last, the committee reviewed 7 information items, including the following: a school emergency response mapping grant, the Nebraska Improvement Grant funds and potential uses for 2025-26, the 2024 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report Audit, a contract for the Child Program and Family Outcomes Measurement System, contracts for the support of the children who are deaf and hard of hearing, and updates on the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, including the grant expenditure update. This concludes the Budget and Finance Committee report. Kristen Christensen, Chair.
Thank you, Kristen. Are there any questions on the Budget and Finance Committee report? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions on the reports in item 7.2.a? Item 7.2.b, is there a motion on that item?
Yes, I move to authorize the commissioner to amend the contract for agriculture, food, and natural resources, education, and FFA support.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to amend the contract for agriculture, food, and natural resources, education, and FFA support. Is there any discussion on this motion? The motion is to authorize the commissioner to amend the contract for agriculture, food, and natural resources education and FFA support. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Christensen,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to amend the contract for agriculture, food, and natural resources education and FFA support is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.2.c?
Yes, I move to authorize the Commissioner to accept funds from the U.S. Department of Education to support the Stronger Connections Technical Assistance and Capacity Building Grant Program aimed at local education agency engagement, student support, and staff and student mental health.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to authorize the Commissioner to accept funds from the U.S. Department of Education to support the Stronger Connections Technical Assistance and Capacity Building Grant Program aimed at local education agency engagement, student support, and staff and student mental health. Is there any discussion on this motion? Lisa?
Yeah, I would like to point out that last month we talked a little bit about the mental health universal screenings and universal approaches to solving some of the issues we're having in our schools. This particular one I had to really dig into quite a bit. I read through the grant multiple times. I'm going to just read one thing that kind of stood out to me. Results of the Nebraska Risk and Protective Factors Student Survey were available for the Behavioral Health Region located in ESU's 13. Survey items included questions specific to whether or not in the last 12 months the student has experienced a lack of sleep, most of the time or always, due to being worried, anxiety. B, the student felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more that they stopped usual activities, depression. And C, those who responded yes when asked if they had considered attempting suicide. Results of this survey indicate a higher proportion of students at risk in the region in nearly all grades. And so I got to doing some research and reading into the universal screeners once again, and I pulled, there's a lot of research out there that's coming out. There's a lot of data that's coming out. There's a study by Oxford that does a large-scale study and is being replicated. It says we need to be moving away from universal prevention and instead invest our limited resources in the refinement and dissemination of interventions with stronger evidence base, such as one-to-one targeted and indirect approaches. And so with that being known, there's a lot of research out there saying if we have truancy issues, we need to target the truancy demographic. If we have depression, then we need to be giving resources for our kids outside of the schools for depression. I've done a ample reading about it. This book, which I'll recommend again and again, kind of talks quite a bit about it. It's called Bad Therapy, Things That Are Happening in Our Schools and How It's Actually Hurting Kids, Not Helping Kids. This study also shows evidence from several large-scale trials that therapeutically informed universal interventions are less effective than targeted approaches and often lead to null effects or unsustained positive effects and also have the potential to elicit negative effects. And so with that being said, I think it's great that we're partnering with Children's Hospital, ESU's, DHHS, but I think it really does need to be more targeted until we have more data that proves otherwise that it's effective. And so while it is only $153,000 grant, I think that when we look at every dollar, we need to have positive impact and proven positive impact before we just automatically vote yes, because we all care about kids, we're all compassionate towards kids, we all want what's best for kids, but we can't just vote yes because of compassion. We have to do facts. We have to look at facts. We've got to do the research, and we've got to put in that time that it takes to make sure that what we're doing is right. And so going through this, I am not seeing any clear evidence that this is something that is going to prove to lower truancy and increase positivity. And if it does, it may only be the day of the actual assembly, or it's very short term. So for that reason, I wanted to bring this up.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, So the motion is to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the U.S. Department of Education to support the Stronger Connections Technical Assistant and Capacity Building Grant Program aimed at local education agency engagement, student support, and staff and student mental health. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Jones,
Yes.
Neary,
To pass this, to support it.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Renner,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Penner,
No.
Christensen,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
No.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
6 yes, 2 no's.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the U.S. Department of Education to support the Stronger Connections Technical Assistance and Capacity Building Grant Program aimed at local education agency engagement, student support, and staff and student mental health is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.2.d?
I do. I move to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture to support the expansion of Farm to School and Walk to Unlock.
Second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture to support the expansion of Farm to School and Walk to Unlock. Is there any discussion on this motion? I just had one question because I'm not on the committee that discusses this, and I'm not sure if it would have even come up in the committee, but is this a similar program to what we saw when we toured, I believe it was Hamilton Public Schools, where they, Hampton, where they grow, kind of grow your own? It is. Okay, thank you. And that was an impressive program and fun to see and tasty food to eat, so.
President Tegmeyer, I do have a.
Yes.
Maybe, I guess it's on. I just wanted to say that I appreciated the plans for sustainability that are in this plan. I mean, it's just a note I wrote, so the sustainability, I think, is an important factor, and I appreciated that being in this.
All right. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture to support the expansion of Farm to School and Walk to Unlock. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Douglas,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Agriculture to support the expansion of Farm to School and Walk to Unlock is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.2.e?
I move to authorize the commissioner to contract with Question Pro Survey Software.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to contract with Question Pro Survey Software. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to contract with Question Pro Survey Software. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Renner,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to contract with Question Pro Survey Software is adopted. All right, agenda item 7.2.f. And the speaker on that is Commissioner Maher. He's gathering.
I'm ready. Thank you. This topic is on the agenda simply to let you know what has happened since the February meeting with regard to the mental health training program grant. I did my best to listen to the whole dialogue last month and really to continue to listen to that dialogue as the month's gone on. In addition, I've done my best to determine what path this board sees as a good path, knowing that no vote has been taken on the topic. So here's what I've done since February. I've listened to a few school districts, very small sample at this point, on some successes they are experiencing in helping students get the assistance they need to navigate school and just being a kid well. Also, I recognize the difference between the roles of teachers and licensed mental health practitioners. There is a distinction there. I have heard from several Nebraskans. You heard from one of them earlier today. I was part of that email response as well. On the mental health topic since the last meeting, I consider each correspondence well-intentioned and well-intended. Please know there was not a unanimous thought on what we should do. I think that speaks to the complexity of the situation. So here's what I'm asking from the board. Give me more time to research what best practice might look like. If I find a solution that works for Nebraska's kids and fits the letter of the law and meets substantially with what I've heard in the last month, I'll bring that to you for further vetting, or at least for your consideration. If I cannot, I'll move on to other topics. But I think the topic is complex enough that it warrants more conversation and more research on our end. So at this point, that's all I'm asking. I'm happy to hear your thoughts today, or your thoughts at any time between now and the April meeting on what we're doing and what we're finding. That's my report on the topic.
Yes, Kirk?
Just briefly, just want to give a little background, and I appreciate Zainab for getting me information, but over the 3 years during COVID, we spent $13.1 million on mental health. It's a big number, and so what I want to do, and I want to make sure it's sustainable, because I don't believe all those schools are continuing with what they did. In fact, I know they're not. So the asks that I have are to define mental health, whether it's statute, define what screening is, address surveys, make sure it's sustainable, measurable. Do not add load to our already overwhelmed teachers. Do not do that, please. And the involvement of parents at the appropriate time, which is always. So those are my suggestions. After we spent $13 million, it's not all sustainable. And she does have a nice report that University of Nebraska Lincoln did. So if you want to see that, ask Zainab for it. But we need something that continues 10 years from now. We tend to throw grants out at things and then they're gone and everything's done, or the teacher moves on. And so that's kind of where I stand. So thank you.
Kirk, just for clarification, you said she has a report, she being
Same.
Dr. Rita?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So if other board members would like that, you can contact Dr. Rita.
That's the, right? Okay.
Okay. Yes, Maggie.
Thank you. My biggest, I know I don't speak up very often, I'm working on it, but my biggest takeaway from last month's discussion about the mental health training was that the word therapy was thrown around a lot. And I just wanted to clarify that therapy is a tool within mental health. It's not synonymous. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. I appreciate that coming from your professional perspective.
Yes.
Love it. Deborah? Any other questions or discussion, anything? Right. Well, once again, thank you for the continuing conversation. I know sometimes it's tricky, but we navigate together, so thank you. Item 7.3, Chair Lisa Schoenhoff will report on behalf of the Planning and Evaluation Committee meeting.
Thank you. The Planning and Evaluation Committee reports on their committee meeting on March 6th, 2025. The members present were Lisa Schoenhoff, Sherry Jones, Deborah Neary, and Kristen Christensen. The committee reviewed 4 action items related to a media specialist requirement waiver request, Rule 11 teacher waiver request, and pilot processes for clinical observations of speech-language pathology and school psychology candidates. The committee recommends board approval on these items. The committee reviewed discussion items with NDE staff, providing summaries and answering questions related to NCTE, organizational policies, plans of corrections for schools, the approval of non-public and interim program schools, a pilot process for cooperating teachers of world languages, and a model behavioral intervention policy for schools. The committee also reviewed informational items related to approval of Rule 11 teacher waiver requests, conditional approval of new Rule 14 schools, accreditation of public schools, non-public schools and ESU systems, and the social studies standards review process. NDE staff will bring these items to a future meeting for discussion and subsequent approval. This concludes the planning and evaluation report.
Are there any questions on the Planning and Evaluation Committee report? Okay, thank you, Lisa. Is there a motion on item 7.3.A?
Yes, Madam President. I move to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request from Schuyler Community Schools.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request from Schuyler Community Schools. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request from Schuyler Community Schools. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Schoenhoff, Douglas,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request from Schuyler Community Schools is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.3.B?
I move to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for speech-language pathology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney.
Second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for speech-language pathology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney. Is there any discussion on this motion? The motion is to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for speech-language pathology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Renner,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for speech-language pathology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.3.C?
Yes, I move to approve the pilot process, or I move to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for school psychology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for school psychology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for school psychology virtually for the University of Nebraska Kearney. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Douglas,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to approve the pilot process for conducting clinical observations for school psychology virtually for the University of Nebraska, Kearney is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.3.d?
I move to authorize the commissioner to approve a waiver request from the NCYF regarding media specialist requirements.
Second.
It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to approve a waiver request from NCYF regarding media specialist requirements. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is to authorize the commissioner to approve a waiver request from NCYF regarding media specialist requirements. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Douglas,
Yes.
Penner,
Yes.
Tegmeyer,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Schoenhoff,
Yes.
8 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to approve a waiver request from the NCYF regarding media specialist requirements is adopted.
President, you just let people know we're aware that this isn't working.
Okay. Okay, so we are aware that we are having some difficulty with our screens, and so I do apologize to the members in our audience as well as those watching online. We are now on agenda item 7.3.e. Board members, are there any questions or discussion on this item? Oh,
You said
yes.
7.3.e?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to share. Okay, thank you, President Tegmeyer. At our last board meeting, I shared a proposal regarding the teacher membership selection process of the Nebraska Council of Teacher Education. Since that time, I have received input which I considered, and I've made some modifications. I've spoken with Planning and Evaluation Committee members, and they have had the opportunity to view the modified proposal. And also just recently, it was posted on the Facebook, full board, FB, full board. I don't even like Facebook. Okay, the full board agenda. And so for the benefit of the public and also to the other board members that are not on the Planning and Evaluation Committee, I will read the proposal aloud. Okay. The number of teacher representatives would remain at 16. Of the 16 teacher representatives, 11 would be selected by the Nebraska State Education Association and 5 selected by NDE with approval of the board. Of the 11 NSEA selected members, 1 member would be from each of the State Board of Education districts, with no more than 2 members from the same district. Thus, each State Board of Education district would have an NSEA representative with 3 additional members at large. The 5 representatives selected by NDE would be individuals with no teacher organization affiliation or having a teacher organization affiliation other than NSEA. In regard to these 5 members, NDE would seek the applications with board members being able to encourage teachers to apply. And I might add that that's as the practice is now in current policy. State Board of Education members are encouraged to make recommendations, so that would not change. In regard to these, okay, I already said that. NSEA's and NDE's applicants and recommended representatives will be brought forth to the Executive Committee. After conferring, the Executive Committee would bring forth 16 names for approval by the full board. I established these numbers based on the information I have. Because this information is considered proprietary, I do not have exact figures. But from what I can discern, there are about 8,000 Nebraska teachers not members of NSEA, and there are close to 27,000 teachers in the state. Thus, about 70% of teachers belong to NSEA, which rounds to about 11 representatives. 30% rounds to 5, so 11 and 5 seems like a fair allocation of representatives. This proposal allows for all Nebraska teachers to have an opportunity to be considered and provides for a fair and balanced representation on the NCTE with representation from each of the 8 State Board of Education districts. Board members, I welcome any comments or questions today and prior to the April board meeting. Thank you.
Maggie?
Sorry, Sherry, what was the 11 and 5?
11 members from NSEA and 5 from either having no affiliation or a different teacher organization affiliation.
Okay.
So 11 and 5 corresponded with the 70 and 30%.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
So I'm new to this, but so NSEA, they nominate their own or make their own recommendations.
Yes.
And what you're asking is that of the other 16,990 teachers that happen to be NSEA members, they can't on their own apply to do it? Like they have to only go through NSEA to be on NICTE?
Okay, it's, from what I was thinking, it would be representative of they could go through NSEA to apply. Because I believe, unless there's something I don't know, that any of their members could apply. I mean, currently, that's where we get all of the members are from NSEA. So they could apply for the NSEA 11 members, representatives, and that leaves the other 8,000 to be in the 5 positions.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about this later so I understand better. I think I'm tripping up on disqualifying people from applying independently, if that's an option, even though they happen to be an NSEA member. Like, I don't know that someone might be a member of the union, but they don't go through the union route to do this. And so you can probably enlighten me about the process, but there's something about that isn't, it just feels a little off to me.
Okay, we can be willing to discuss that. Thank you, Liz.
Kristen? Thanks. Yeah, I agree with the geographical distribution that you've proposed, making sure that there's teacher members that are from each of our districts. So they're representing all parts of the state. So thank you for thinking about that. And also appreciate the distribution of 70% that are represented by NSEA and 30% that are represented from the state at large. Though I would agree with Liz that while there are teachers that are due-paying members of NSEA, they may not be active and involved in the organization, and therefore may not be selected or informed about the process to go through NSEA to be a part of this organization. So I would propose that we just strike and reword that those 5 selected, that we just state they're 5 selected through NDE, and not have the other qualifying portions of that statement, to make sure that it really is open to the whole state. And with that, making sure that our alternates are allocated with the same percentage, that there's 70% of the alternates through NSEA selection and 30% of the alternates through NDE selection, so that it's the same balance there.
May I respond?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I appreciate your thoughtful comments, Kristen. What I would, in the alternates, I think that's well thought out. That makes sense to me. What I would like to encourage perhaps is that the NSEA organization itself makes sure that they reassess and see if it is truly open to all of their members fairly, so that all of the members, whether they are fully participating or engaged or active, that all of their members have an opportunity. So I think I would take that to NSEA and encourage them to make sure that all of their members have the opportunity. That's how I would respond to that. Thank you.
I'm just going to say that I appreciate this. I'm not on this committee, and so this gives me a lot to think about before our next meeting next month. I appreciate Board Member Jones bringing this up because as I've been rereading through our board operating policies, we are supposed to review our advisory boards and how those are put together. And so it's nice to be working with a whole team where we all have eyes in different areas, because that wasn't something I had even thought of. So thanks for opening the discussion to us. I appreciate that. Deb.
Yeah, I agree, Sherry, and thanks for thinking about ways to compromise, because I just like that thought process that you used, and you quantified things with good reason. And the only feedback I had, somebody called me last week that's associated with NACD and wanted to talk about this, and their only feedback to me was that the way it stands now, there's been 2 positions that the Department of Education has had to fill. And historically, at least for the last 5 or more years, the NDE has had trouble filling those. And their concern was to actually give NDE more positions, and that was without all the rules that you're putting on it now. And to give NDE more positions to fill, that they had concerns about that. And I also just feel, and comments that I've heard, is that people don't understand what we're trying to fix, because it really looks like we're only trying to reduce NSEA's participation and get some geographic distribution, which I think we all are for. But, you know, if those 5 positions can be open to anyone, whether they're NSEA or not, it certainly would be worth considering for support, because it does feel like a compromise. But in general, I still am unsure what we're fixing. So thanks, Sherry.
Kirk?
So currently, all the teacher reps for NCTE come from the NSEA. Is that currently correct?
Other than the 2 that are appointed by the State Board of Education, but they may be members, so it could be anywhere from 14 to 16, and I don't look back to see what their affiliation was, because that wasn't, I just wanted to make, right now, the 8,000 that are not getting an opportunity and haven't for probably 84 years, to give them an opportunity.
It's not real equitable.
Very fair and balanced, I think.
Absolutely.
And I did, I'll add one thing. I did contact NDE staff before, as I came up with the 5 numbers, and they thought that they could fill those 5. I just think perhaps it's how we go about soliciting, and maybe we can be a bit more involved in that process. So I think it's doable. Maybe we just need to change how we reach out. That would be my thought. But I did check ahead of time to see if they felt like they could come up with 5, and it was the affirmative. So thank you.
All right, Lisa, I see you want to speak.
I appreciate learning about what NCTE does, because before you brought this to the attention of our committee meeting, I didn't know. And so I think, to clarify for Nebraskans who may not know, it is an advisory body, to the Nebraska State Board of Education. It is responsible for developing and recommending standards for state board approval and adoption relating to state approval of higher education institutions, providing teacher, counselor, and/or administrative preparatory programs. And so I think it's definitely a very, very important council. And when we look at teachers in classrooms across the state, you're right, it needs to be well represented, because there might be teachers who are willing to speak up and say, hey, I wasn't prepared in this area when I started teaching. This is something we need to work on. And if they're being guided or led by anyone, that it could actually hurt the process. So I appreciate that you brought that up. I would have never known to look into that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the things to think about, and this is a discussion item today, so we will see it moving forward. Agenda item 7.3.f is a discussion item, plan of correction for schools. Board members, are there any questions or discussion on this item? I know it was a rather lengthy file to read through. Okay, seeing no comments, we will move to agenda 7.3.g, approval of non-public schools for 2025-2026. Board members, are there any questions or discussion on this item? Deborah?
Well, there was a discussion about the difference between approved schools and non-approved schools. I'm sorry, accredited schools and approved schools. And we asked for just a little bit more information so that all of us could better understand the differences. I know that there are very few people out there that really understand the differences unless they've been through the process. And so, and I've been on the board and asked this question a lot, and I've looked at all the checklists for everything, but it's still, I mean, I think I understand it a little bit better, but with so many new board members, that might be a discussion or a work study or a work session sometime.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay. Agenda item 7.3.h. This is the approval of the interim program schools for 2025-2026. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Had an over-under bet. No, I didn't. About what time we're almost done. I'm going to have to slow down so I can beat Ryan's bet. All right, agenda item 7.3.I. This is the pilot process for cooperating teacher qualifications in the area of world language. Board members, any questions or discussion on this item? I'm just going to say that I appreciate the thoughtfulness of this item, because we do know that we do have a bit of a teacher shortage, and sometimes finding a cooperating teacher for our student teachers is difficult. And so making some allowances is appreciative. So thank you to our staff for thinking this through. All right, item 7.3.j, model behavioral intervention policy for schools. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Lisa?
This is a passion of mine because it's a really big concern regarding teacher retention behavior in our classrooms. I have had the joy of sitting in the hallways teaching my English as a second language groups. And so I've gotten to observe from another perspective, from a classroom teacher, because they're in it, and an administrator, because they're not usually just sitting there in the hallways watching, listening, teaching, and parents as well. So as a mom, a teacher, and specifically a teacher that teaches in the hallways and sees a lot going on, and being friends with lots and lots of teachers who will say the biggest complaint is the behaviors that they're having in their classrooms, and sometimes they can feel that there is lack of support in dealing with those behaviors. And I was really excited to see this behavior plan because of the fact that I thought, ooh, this could be a really great opportunity to solve this top problem in education that our educators are feeling. Come to find out, this might not be the best place to do it. And so with that being said, I look forward to working with the ESUs and the people who are providing training for teachers and administrators and having further conversations with our commissioner as well to see if there's more that can be done in this area. If there's encouragement on some trainings that we can do. I'm not sure how all that works, where the training comes from. I know we've been using PBIS for a long time and CPI, which is Crisis Prevention Institute. And so if there's a place or a time that we can kind of re-examine some of the things that are being pushed out to our schools and where that's coming from and if it's really the most effective. Because I think if we wanted to solve teacher retention, figuring out our behavior issues in our schools, and from what I've seen over time, it's kind of gone in the wrong direction, and I know there's a lot that goes into that, but I appreciate all the work you've done on this policy, model policy.
Kirk.
So I just have two questions. And I don't know how you're...
Kirk, do you want to ask a staff member to come?
I would like to have.
Okay.
Zainab
Dr.
come.
Rita, could
Yeah.
you come forward?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So,
good morning, Zainab Rida, Student Services Officer.
So on this, as it stands right now, if I am not trained, can I intervene in any type of student behavior issue? When you're training, and I haven't been able to pinpoint everything here, so my question is really, if I'm not trained, can I help break up a bad situation, or do I have to stand and watch?
So the purpose of this, it's a model policy.
Right.
So, and what we did, we utilized the language that it says in the statutes,
Right.
what is the purpose of the model policy. So we do not say like, what do you need to do? So it's up to the school districts. So we give kind of mention about what are the best practices in each of those components that's required by the statute.
Okay, so you're just writing, it's a model policy, I
It's a
get that.
model, mhm.
So no influence to the school districts on how they write their policy specifically?
No, they can go above and beyond as long they have all these components that it's outlined in the statutes.
Okay. And then the other quick one, so if in this policy, which I have not read through, so I apologize,
Right.
it's going to be broad stroked. So if I'm a school district that has a classroom where the student is misbehaving and they empty the entire room of all the misbehaving students, and leave the student that is misbehaving in the classroom, is that a school district policy?
If you look at the page number 4 of the draft, it's mentioned about how to address in what are the criteria for removal of students.
Of the student that's
Mhm.
causing the misbehavior?
Right. So
Okay.
there are criteria outline what are the steps that the school they can take.
They can, as opposed to emptying the room and leaving the misbehaving student in the
It
classroom?
depends on the situation, yeah.
Okay. And it's going to be up to the school district?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Deborah?
Oh, Zainab. Sorry, we just in the last year have had more model policies than we've had before. And so I certainly have an assumption that I think I know the answer, but I'm hoping you can validate or share with me the correct answer. But my understanding is that when you're writing a model policy, that everything in there is, I mean, we're only doing this because there was a law passed that says we have to. But the work that you're doing is it's evidence-based, it's based on research and data, it's based on talking to experts across the state and teachers across the state that you've really pulled from everywhere, that there's evidence in order to call this a model policy. Okay, that's all I wanted.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Rita. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, well, we will move to agenda item 7.4. Chair Maggie Douglas will report on behalf of the Rules and Regulations Committee meeting.
The Rules and Regulations Committee reports on the March 6, 2025 meeting of the committee. Members present were Chair Maggie Douglas, Vice Chair Liz Renner, Elizabeth Tegmeyer, and Kirk Penner. Committee members reviewed the rules report. Committee members asked for staff to contact the Attorney General's office on the status of Rule 21 certification and Rule 24 endorsements. NDE staff provided information on the proposed repeal of Rule 8, school finance and budgeting / state funding of education service units and learning communities in response to the repetition of statutory provisions. The committee recommended proceeding with the repeal. NDE staff provided information on the proposed repeal of Rule 22 Master Teacher Program in response to legislation repealing the program. The committee recommended proceeding with the repeal. NDE staff provided information on the proposed repeal of Rule 25 Excellence in Teaching Act in response to legislation transferring the program to the Coordinating Council for Post-Secondary Education. The committee recommended proceeding with the repeal. NDE staff provided information on the proposed repeal of Rule 26, Procedures for the Mentor-Teacher Programs, in response to the repeal of funding provisions. The committee recommended proceeding with the repeal and placing the guidelines on the NDE guidance page. NDE staff provided information on the revision of Rule 20, Approval of Educator Preparation Programs. Staff shared a policy scan of information from other states. The committee will continue to discuss this topic. NDE staff shared that the public hearing for Rule 3, Identification of High Ability Learning, is scheduled for April 8th, 2025 at 9 o'clock on Zoom. This concludes the Rules and Regulations Committee reports. Maggie Douglas, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the Rules and Regulations Committee report? So we are now on item 8, additional business. We had one item pulled from the consent agenda, item 6.7.b. And I would like someone to make a motion on that item. Is anyone willing to do that? Could someone, I have it right here, if somebody can read it.
Okay. I move to authorize the Commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services to support the prevention of youth tobacco use and prevention education for local education agencies across Nebraska.
Second. It has been moved and seconded to authorize the Commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services to support the prevention of youth tobacco use and prevention education for local education agencies across Nebraska. Is there any discussion on this motion? Lisa?
Yes, thank you for pulling that one out. One of the things that I noticed is that this is a grant from the DHHS for $190,000 to be renewed twice, and we're in our second time, or we're in our first renewal. And so one of the things that I'd asked for was any data that shows that it's been effective, and there is no data out yet at this time. So one of the things that it brought me back to is, of course, we don't want our children smoking. We don't want our children doing drugs. It brought me back to as a kid when we did DARE programs. And so I looked on the NIH website to see what we found with DARE. And over again, it says, we provided an updated meta-analysis on the effectiveness of Project DARE in preventing alcohol, tobacco, and illicit drug use among school-aged youths, methods, ... But overall, the results show that our study supports previous findings indicating that DARE is ineffective. And so I'm wondering if there's something that's really fantastic about this program that is working, and if so, absolutely I would be all in. But if not, I think we need to watch what we're doing with our taxpayer dollars if it is not effective. So I would need to know that it's actually effective before I would want to vote yes on renewing the $190,000.
Lisa, do you have a question? I mean, I'm not sure if that was a question that you'd like staff to come and speak to, or no?
I just am stating the reason why I pulled it out of the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Kirk? Do we have an idea of what it's going for? I mean, that's her question. I mean, it's $190,000. Do they have a program that they've been doing for decades, or they do what they want with it? Or does anybody know? I'm asking you and you don't know either. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But that's kind of if there's some information we could get.
Would you like to call a staff member forward to answer your question?
Sure, let's do that.
All right. I believe this is put on the agenda by Dr. Rita. We're getting your steps in today.
Good morning again, Zainab Rida, Student Services Officer. Would you please state your question so I can?
Lisa, you want to state your question so you can?
If you're not speaking, can you please turn off your microphone? Thank you.
Yes. So what I had emailed earlier was, is there any data that shows that this is working? Is there any more information about it? And it appears as that DHHS is over all of that, and there isn't any at this point.
That is correct. So this is a 5-year grant that we are a excuse me, we are subrecipient for this grant, and we have 1 more year left to conclude this grant. However, DHHS is the agency who's responsible on collecting the data and the evaluation, and usually those data would be available when they conclude the grant, which is next year.
Deborah?
I just want to ask a question about process, and I don't know if this goes to you or some other staff person, but I guess I just always assume, maybe Ryan, this might be yours, sorry. I just assume that if something's on consent agenda, it's gone through a committee. And if so, then I'm just wondering if this was discussed at length in the committee, or if it just didn't go through a committee.
So, Dr. Four, I think what we're asking is, could you explain to the board the process for items being placed on consent agenda? Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Ryan Four. The question is, how are items placed on the consent agenda? And I also heard about this item specifically. Okay, so board policy allows for an item to be placed on the consent agenda, a grant or a contract, for example, for up to 3 times after it first came through a committee, okay? And so in the case of this item, yes, this item would have been reviewed likely by the Budget and Finance Committee if previously. So it would not have been reviewed necessarily by the committee this year, or I shouldn't say that, at this meeting, right? But at a previous meeting, yes, we do not place grants or contracts on the consent agenda until they have been reviewed by a committee and within the scope of that 4-year time limit, if that makes sense.
Any further questions before Dr. Four moves back to his place? Kirk, you have a question for Dr. Four?
So at the end in 2026 April, this contract's over. That'll be the 5 years.
I'm getting the affirmative
You're
from
getting the
Dr.
affirmative?
Rita.
Okay, I keep looking. Okay, so then we would have data after that. Did we do this 10 years ago, or is this a new? It looks like the.
I'm getting a negative. We did not do this.
So this is new.
Ago.
Okay, so we'll have data after this year.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Four. Thank you.
And
yes.
May I comment?
Sure, yes.
I just personally, I would like to see in the future, like asking DHHS for midterm gathering of data, because when we go 5 years, and at the end, if there isn't showing significant benefit, then we've kind of used a lot of money, I think, not very effectively, or I'm not finding the right word. But so I think just I need to be more in tuned when I see a grant for 5 years and okay, we're in the middle of it. I need some information because I really need to see effectiveness if I'm going to consider voting for something like this. But now, if I were to vote no, and it's like they've got 1 more year, how can I expect if I say no and it doesn't go through, then I've kind of chopped it off at the knees, so to speak. And so for me, it kind of puts me in a difficult situation, but I guess I need data in between is what I'm saying.
Great feedback. Deb?
I just want to say I totally agree with you on that one, Sherry. I haven't had the conversation since I was first on the board about our grant process and the reporting back during, especially in a 5-year. But back then, I was just surprised at some of the leniency because I spent my career just writing grants and reports, and maybe it's changed. So I'm not saying that's what it's like today, but I definitely think, especially with a 5-year grant, some kind of summary that comes to us when we're renewing it would be really helpful. So thank you for bringing that up.
All right, great points. And I know Dr. Rita especially is taking note, so getting lots of affirmative from her. So the item, and I don't want to cut off any more discussion. Is there any more? Okay, the item is, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services to support the prevention of youth tobacco use and prevention education for local education agencies across Nebraska. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Tegmeyer?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Neary?
Yes.
Douglas?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Penner?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Schoenhoff?
No.
7 yes, 1 no.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to accept funds from the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services to support the prevention of youth tobacco use and prevention education for local education agencies across Nebraska is approved. The next items on the agenda, items 9.1 to 9.2, are information items and written reports for the board. Agenda item 10, the good of the order. This section of the agenda is intended for board members to offer informal observations of the work of the state board. Board members may make brief announcements about attendance at future events for the purpose of informing other board members. No business or motions or suggested actions of the board may be offered at this point in the agenda, nor should board members engage in substantive discussion about other agenda items or introduce new agenda items. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Thank you to those who attended in person and who tuned into the broadcast. The next meetings of the State Board of Education are scheduled for April 3rd and 4th, 2025 in Lincoln, Nebraska. The March 7th, 2025 State Board meeting is adjourned.